Now, namely about the stomach, the entrails, the kidneys, and the tail of a sheep, which grows to an excessive size in many Eastern countries. Yep. Produces a large quantity of rich fat, were forbidden to be eaten in the case of animals offered to Jehovah in sacrifice. Leviticus, 3, 3, 9, 17, 7, 3, 23. The ground of the prohibition was that the fat was the richest part of the animal and therefore belonged to him. Leviticus 3:16. The burning of fat sacrifices was particularly specified in each kind of offering. Oh. Then there's the word father. Yes, the position and authority of a father as the head of the family is expressly assumed and sanctioned in Scripture as a likeness of that of the Almighty over his creatures. It lies, oh my gosh, it is the truth, of course, at the root of the so-called patriarchal government. Yes. Now that's a different meaning of the word lie. See, I do know how to spell lie, Lie. Yes. And those of you right now, it is the truth, of course, at the root of the so-called patriarchal government. Let's not change the meaning of the Bible or any of the words that are used to define, yes, the words in the Bible. Oh, now did you want to stop your lying today, right now? It is the truth, of course, at the root of the so-called patriarchal government. Now, I am a father, right? I have 5 sons, yes, and they're in the wrong grades because of your corrupt government thinking that you don't have to enforce the fucking law. Now, I told you that I wanted them. I'm going to want you to enforce the Constitution of this state and every state of the United States. And for all of you elected to office, I want you to know what your number one responsibility is. It's not to solve society's problems. Now, this idea that there's a housing shortage, right? I know there is. And there's lots and lots of people that would be willing to build housing. Yes. And you don't really have to try to find them. You'd be surprised if you open up different places of land. Yes. They will show themselves to you. But you're legislating. Well, it's not that difficult. Anytime you give somebody the availability of making money, yeah, they will. So why don't you use less government and more forethought about just letting people build? Now, I know there's a water problem, a pollution problem, a sewage problem, an electricity problem. I mean, you've got all these. Well, if you enforce the laws that are right now today, yes, I would get my sons and then I could sue you. I'd have you removed from government. I'd take all your personal assets. Then I'd invest that money in different types of building projects that would house the various persons that need housing. Now, as much as you thought that I didn't have that available, I know. Isn't that funny? You're a sworn oath of office. And you seem to think that you do not have the responsibility of your oath. Well, you could stop playing government, okay? And you could start doing what you have sworn. Now, I'm going to want custody of my sons today. Do you understand that? And you're going to give them to me. And then there are certain individuals that I'm going to want to speak to. And then there are lawsuits for all of you that thought that your job was to solve the problems. That's not your job. Well, I guess you better just put on the back burner any fucking thing you thought you were going to do until you get your lawsuit. Now, I emailed the whole state legislature. Yes, every judge. So why don't you just do what you have sworn? Now, this position of authority of the father as the head of the family, do you have a difficult time understanding that as a father, I am the head of my 5 sons? Yes. I wasn't a resident of Washington State when you issued the protection order. When you arrested me at the same time as serving me. When you allowed for my wife, yes, to motion the court for default you will have to do what you have sworn, and then you'll have to accept the consequences of covering up your crime. Now, did you want to look at the fat today? Fat her? Now, for all the appellate court judges that thought, well, I should be deceived. There's the Thessalonians 2, verse 3. Let no man or woman deceive you by any means, for that day will not come except there come a falling away first, and let that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Now, you're opposing and exalting yourselves above God, and well, deception is believing the lie that you don't have to enforce the laws. You have to enforce them. You can never use a forgery. The petitioner always has to be the actual individual that motions the court. You can never use lookalikes or twins. Yes. You can never violate the laws of the United States. Sheriff. Now, for 3 years, I've explained to you what the law says. And you wanted to believe the lie, but the lie is not the truth. The truth is, you have to give every individual notice and opportunity to be heard before having court hearings. You have to have proof of service in the court file before you allow for a court hearing. Yes. Then when the individual appears in court, it has to be before a fair and impartial judge. Yes. And when you have a marriage certificate that was not issued from any state of the United States of America, you have to realize the limitations of the authority of the jurisdiction of the judiciary. Now, you refuse to acknowledge any limitations of power. You have been deceived. Not myself. I made sure what the law says. I told you what the law says, and your whole way of handling any and all problems was to act like you could live in the deception of my way.